Okay guys, so the last thing we're going to look at for this week's topic in the internal analysis is the SWOT analysis. Now, the first thing I'll start off by saying about the SWOT is that, as you can see, it is certainly concerned with some internal elements to do with the firm, its internal strengths and weaknesses, so those things inside the firm that it either does well or does poorly, but it does also include or consider those external factors that represent either opportunities or threats, so those things outside of the organisation which could either be taken advantage of or need to be minimised. For the purpose of this unit, this will be a really good lead into next week, given that we are looking next week at the external environment. So certainly the strengths and weaknesses is going to be really relevant now for this week, and then you can be considering those opportunities and threats when we talk about the external environment next week. The important distinction, of course, to make here, guys, when we are looking at the SWOT analysis is, unfortunately, it has nothing to do with sit, wag, or treats, and is certainly not to do with what must be Samuel L. Jackson's worst movie of all time, SWOT. Slightly different to what we're talking about today. But as I say, the key thing to take away from this is that include focus on both the internal and external forces, and certainly those things that you do well and poorly as a company, and those things outside of the organisation that you either need to minimise, that being the threats, or hopefully take advantage of, being those external opportunities. If we look over the slide here, I'm not going to go through all of these in a lot of detail. You can certainly do that in your own time as you look over the slides. But we have some good common examples here of strengths and weaknesses. So obviously things like the brand name is really important. If you've got a strong brand name, that will be certainly a strength. Having the resources and capabilities that are valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable obviously means that they will not only be a potential source of sustainable competitive advantage and core competencies for you, will also most likely represent strengths. On the other hand, you can have the lack of obviously a clear strategic vision will be a weakness. Having no developed or proven core competencies obviously puts you at a disadvantage, the lack of attention to customer needs and so on. So there are plenty of strengths and weaknesses here that can be derived from your resources, capabilities, and potentially even core competencies here. Alright, so as we go over the page now, you see these external factors, and again, I won't go into too much detail here. You can have a look over these in your own time, but certainly having a look at those opportunities outside your firm, like additional customer groups that you might be able to identify or looking to expand into geographic markets. We'll talk about that a little later in the semester when we do our internationalization strategy. But certainly that would be a clear opportunity for you. On the other hand, identifying factors like the slowdowns in market growth that you currently compete in, the likely entry of potential new competitors, or also the growing bargaining power of customers or suppliers. These are all factors which can reduce or worsen your competitive position. So you're going to need to be aware of those and potentially try and minimize their impact. Should have actually done this earlier, guys. I apologize for that. Alright, so once you have looked at your opportunities and your threats externally, and you've also identified those strengths and weaknesses, you can then come up with strategies to deal with them. And obviously there'll be some strategies that will hopefully take advantage of the opportunities and further develop your strengths. There might be some opportunities, the WO type, that you can take advantage of to reduce your weaknesses and improve in those areas. There might be some strategies that you can create, the ST strategies, that utilize and leverage your strengths to try and minimize those threats. And the WT strategies are going to be the most difficult for you. Those strategies that try and counteract your threats by improving your weaknesses.